Hey, what's up, guys? Infusions Cap here with Raven's Anger.
Hey everybody.
As some of you may already know, there's some pretty big changes going on with modified goats. GoatFormat.com has shut down support of modified goats, but the format is not going away. There is a brand new Discord server that has been created to continue this on. Shout outs to Soul for picking that up. Really appreciate it. And with this new server comes a new band list. So we're going to talk about that today. Some of the changes from the last list that were a little more on the experimental and ambitious side have kind of been reverted, and we're back to a more neutral position with this list. So let's get right into it. So compared to the last list, Machiora the Destructor and Mirage of Nightmare are both getting banned again. I think this is for the best. There were definitely some unfair things that you could do with Machiora. Mirage didn't really get a lot of opportunities to shine since the previous iteration of the list was pretty short lived. What are your thoughts on these, Ravensanger?
Yeah, I got to play with both of these. Machiora was not impressive in the fair decks, but obviously if you try to do some stuff with like Cyberjar, Desert Sunlight, you could do some pretty nasty combos that is very similar to what they were trying to stop with Book of Tau being put to one. Machiora just kind of lets you bypass that, right? And
Yeah,
then on the other
definitely.
hand, you have Mirage and Nightmare, where even if you play it and you don't have Mystical Space Typhoon or a way to get rid of it, you still get to draw and see a bunch of cards. And with Sinister, you actually get to go up a card every turn. So it's and on the flip side is when your opponent plays it and they draw a bunch of cards, you can't destroy it until their next turn when they discard, right? So it's like puts you in a bad spot. Like there was one game where my opponent had Mirage and like three face downs, and I had like a couple face down cards as well and a Heavy Storm. But if I played my Heavy Storm, my opponent just gets to keep all the cards he just drew off Mirage and Nightmare. So it puts you in a pretty bad spot.
Definitely an awkward card, and I think it's on the ban list for a reason. It's very hard to unban things and not really disrupt the ecosystem that Konami already had in place. It's pretty delicate as is.
Yeah, I'm not sad to see either one go.
So no other changes to the band section. Everything else is standard to what it is in normal goats, with the exception of Butterfly Dagger Elmo, which is remaining at 1. And of course, BLS, Delinquent Duo, Trap Dust Shoot, and Self Destruct button will remain banned as they pretty much always have in modified. Speaking of Butterfly Dagger staying at 1, let's talk about that. So obviously that means the Exodia combo is still an option. Now, how consistent that's going to be, it's anybody's guess. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it is pretty inconsistent. I haven't gotten around to testing it too much, but it's something that can always be reverted if it gets too strong. I don't think it's too strong though.
I agree. I think it definitely is going to have a hard time performing against some of the other decks. I anticipate this being a pretty fast format, and we'll get into some of the reasons for that as we go here. Let's talk about Breaker the Magical Warrior and Exiled Force. So, in the previous list, we were given those cards at 2 copies, and we're going back to the standard one to match goats. I think this is a really good idea. Both of those cards, Breaker is just insane value anyway. Exiled Force, being such a good activator for Last Will, was really pushing decks like Rescue Cat. So I think those are good changes to have those back at 1.
Yeah, I agree. These are both one ofs. There's really no reason to put them any further than one.
Alright, so Gravekeeper Spy is staying at 1. I believe there was a bit of a debate about it maybe going back to 2, but I think for the sake of not homogenizing deck building, leaving it at 1 is probably the way to go. Another card that is getting limited that has not been limited before is Magician of Faith. This is probably one of the more consequential changes of the list. This is definitely going to be a big hit to any turbo-esque deck or control strategies that are looking to abuse Thousand Eyes Restrict and Tsukiyomi. That's going to cut off a lot of lines. What do you think about Magician of Faith to 1?
Yeah, Magician of Faith, it's just so easy if you draw Pot of Greed or Graceful, and then you get to resolve your Magician of Faith and get those back. The game can just spiral out of control from there, and there's almost no way to lose. The other thing is being able to reuse it with Tsukiyomi. You can't really restrict Tsukiyomi to one because most people only play one anyway, so you can't solve it there unless you ban Tsukiyomi. I don't think most people want Tsukiyomi banned, so I think putting Magician of Faith is the correct choice.
I agree. I think it's probably long overdue. It's one of the biggest offenders for snowballing games. So it'll be really interesting to see how decks sort of evolve. And with it being a light monster, that's gonna change the ratios a little bit. There is another light monster that's normally limited that's going to 2. We'll get to that here in a little bit. So maybe that's kind of a give and take on that. Cyberstein remaining at 1. Demok, Genzo, Sang, and Tribe, of course, at 1. The Jars, Injection, Sinister, Exodia pieces all make sense. All the same as normal goats. Level Limit Area B was at 1 in the previous list and will remain as such on this list. Same for Giant Trunade and Upstart Goblin. United We Stand, going back to 1. So this was pushed to 2 in the previous list. It's a pretty big boost for Benkai or any deck that was comboing United with Scapegoat. And frankly, I think that was just too powerful. I think 1 is really where you need United to be. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think United at 1 is fine. Putting it at 2 just leads to more OTKs, and I am opposed to that, so.
Yeah, it makes sense. Book of Taiyu staying at 1, of course. Cardi, Graceful, Heavy Storm, Vortex, MST, Pot of Greed, Premature, Snatch Steel Swords. All one-ofs all the time. Emergency Provisions is remaining at 1, even though Mirage of Nightmare is getting banned. This is likely because Good Goblin Housekeeping is also going to stay at 3 on this list. What are your thoughts on provisions being limited? Do you think that's kind of unnecessary, or does it make sense with GGH getting uncapped?
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be limited. You could definitely change that, but either way, it's not a big deal.
I agree. It's probably not going to make too big of a difference. And then rounding out the limit to 1 cards are the obvious things: Call, Ceasefire, DDV, Mirror Force, Reckless Greed, Torrential Tribute, and Ring of Destruction is remaining at 1. It is not getting banned. Alright, so let's talk about the semi-limits now. Night Assailant was at 1 in the previous version of the list. The previous 2 versions of the modified list, actually. And it's going back to 2 now. I think with Spy at 1 and Magician of Faith going to 1, this is probably okay. There is still the possibility of NA for NA and you loop them, but that's not necessarily the biggest deal if the format's pretty aggressive. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I've always liked Night Assailant. I don't think it's too powerful, and I kind of like it at 2 because, obviously if you get both of them, you can just discard one, get the other one back as many times as you can discard things, right?
Right.
And, it being at 3, you would be able to activate that more often. So being at 2, I kind of like it. It just feels right to me.
Yeah, me too. I feel like it's kind of the sweet spot. Okay, so the other light monster that's usually restricted and is going to 2 is DD Warrior Lady. This is probably the other big change for this format. This is going to have a bit of a ripple effect throughout the meta, and we'll kind of come back to it at the end of all this. But I do think this is an important change to take stock of, and I do think DD Warrior Lady is going to go up in play in this iteration of the list. What are your thoughts on this change?
Yeah, I think DD Warrior Lady is a good card. It will definitely be a 2 of in a lot of warrior decks, and might even make some chaos decks now, so we'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on that one. Sacred Phoenix staying at 2 on this list. Protector, the obvious stuff: Swap, Nobleman, Rhoda, Last Turn. Gravity Bind was at 3 in the previous list. We're going down to 2. So now we're going from 4 total floodgates down to 3, a 1 LLab, 2 Gravity Bind split. I think it is important to note that with Magician of Faith going to 1, there's less recursion of cards like Heavy Storm and Mystical Space Typhoon to deal with those floodgates. So perhaps this limitation of bind down to 2 is kind of a counterbalance to that to keep Burn from running away with things. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. I think this is totally fine.
And Magic Cylinder is going from 3 down to 2. So in normal goats, it's at 1. Last mod list, it was at 3. And now we're looking at having it at 2. What do you think the sweet spot is for cylinders?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure if it should be at 1, 2, or 3. It doesn't see a whole lot of play at 1. I think putting it to 2 would be the next natural step. So let's see what it does from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. We can kind of approach it more gradually that way. So I like what's going on there. Alright, and finally the unlimited cards. Reflect Bounder is staying unlimited, as are Manticore of Darkness, Abyss Soldier, Vampire Lord, Marauding Captain, Twin-Headed Behemoth, Chick the Yellow, and we got a few changes here at the end. So Mage Power was at 2 in the previous list. It's going to 3 here. And this is kind of an offset, I guess, for United going back down to 1. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think 1 United, 3 Mage is still too much of a boost to those kinds of decks? Or, should they just be 1 and 1 forever? Or would you have gone maybe 1 United, 2 Mage? What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think United is a little bit more playable in other decks than Mage Power. Because Mage Power, you really have to have, 3 to 4 other cards to make it worth playing. Otherwise, it's just Acts of Despair, right?
Right.
So it is interesting that, Mage Power does work very well with itself. So if you have 2 Mage Power, it's going to be a lot better than just having 1. So we'll have to see for this one, but I am not sure.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on. And rounding this out, Good Goblin Housekeeping staying at 3, as we mentioned before. And I think that's fine if you want to have a shot at that card actually being playable, right? I mean, at 2, it just can't see the light of day. There's not enough ROI, It's going to be way too slow to get any kind of value out of it. So I think it pretty much has to be at 3 to even have a shot. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think if it's at 3, it's a card you can consider, and if it's at less than 3, it's not a card.
Exactly. And then finally, Jar of Greed is going back up to 3. In the previous list, we were looking at 1 Upstart, 2 Jar. Now we're looking at 1 Upstart, 3 Jar. I think that's okay. Jar of Greed and Upstart Goblin, they are just kind of filler that allow you to break the 40 card rule, essentially. But I do think Jar of Greed is more interesting than Upstart. For one thing, it's slower. And for another, you can bluff with it, you can try to bait with it, so I don't hate it going back to 3. I think that's perfectly reasonable. What do you think about it, though?
Yeah, I kind of liked it at 2, but I think it being at 3 doesn't really matter. Most people won't play the full 3 anyway, but it is an option. It could maybe be a problem with 3 Jar and 3 Good Goblin Housekeeping, but I doubt it.
Yeah, I do too. I think, I've already said this a few times, but I do think the format's going to speed up, and, Jar of Greed is slow compared to something like Upstart. So there's definitely a little bit of risk associated with it, but the ceiling is higher. So it will be interesting to see what kind of an impact that going back to 3 ends up having. So all things considered with this new list, what do you think the big winners and losers are in terms of archetypes?
Yeah, I still think Earth Echo is really good. I think Warriors are still going to be good. Chaos is a little weaker with only 1 Magician, but now you have 2 Night Assailants to play around with. Scapegoat decks still really powerful. Scapegoat and Meta are still at 3 each. And that means Reasoning as well will also still be fine, as we've seen. I still think Burn has a lot of good stuff going for it. 2 Magic Cylinders, Rescue Cat. It doesn't have 2 Uniteds now, but maybe there's a version with Mage Power. We'll have to see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things shake out. I think Earth Aggro, Warriors, and decks like Angel Return are probably the big winners here. And even though Burn and Rescue Cat are still very playable with this iteration of the list, I do think they probably lost the most overall. Other than, decks like Chaos Turbo, the Magician of Faith limit and the DD Warrior Lady semi-limit are the 2 most impactful changes overall that are going to kind of ripple through the meta and define everything, I think. All right, well, that's just about it. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I like this ban list. I'm excited to play some more games. And now that Modified has its own Discord, we can have everything concentrated in one point instead of having, half and half, right?
Yeah, that's true. It is going to be a lot more streamlined in that way, and I think that's overall going to be good for the health of the format.
For sure.
All right, make sure to check out the link in the description. Come on in and join the Discord, get in on the discussion, play some tournaments with us, and definitely stay tuned to the channel. Moving forward from here, we're going to be playing all of the modified games under this new ban list, so be sure to let us know what you guys think. And until next time, thanks for watching.